Okay, first of all, I will start by speaking a little bit about my background. So I was born and raised in Egypt in a typical conservative Sunni family. And for me, this was how I saw the world, through the lens of religion. Everything in my society was built around this, around religion, around the belief in God. And actually, ironically, I think it was my father who turned me into an atheist, because since a very young age, he encouraged me to read a lot. So I would say I developed some kind of critical mind, so to speak, and it was difficult for me to accept things as they are without questioning them. And that led me to, at some point, to say, okay, now I need to really understand my religion. Because most Muslims, they take religion not out of conviction, but out of inheritance. So I wanted to reason myself into the religion, or confirm my belief in it. And then I started to study the scripture, the Quran, the Hadith, the history of Islam, and so on. And I tried to make sense of it for myself, but at some point it no longer made sense, and the more I read, the less it made sense. So I decided to leave Islam, and that was 2010. Shortly after, when I started to be a little bit more open with my views, just slightly so, because it's dangerous where I come from, I ran into trouble with some people who found my views objectionable, and also the police got involved and things got a little bit messy, and I had to leave Egypt. And, well, I will skip a part. Then I came here to Sweden, and eventually I was... That's not me.
The library will close in 15 minutes.
Yes, and then I was finally given asylum here in Sweden. But it took me like 3 years to get the asylum. It was a little bit of a struggle, but well, here I am. And I also decided to found a network or organization here in Sweden for people who have left Islam, ex-Muslims, Sveriges, exmuslimer, because a lot of people also who have left Islam, even here in Sweden, they are facing problems, and they are not able to be open with their views out of fear of their families or their communities and so on. So it was an eye-opener for me to find that even here in Sweden it's difficult to be fully who you are. And then about a year ago, I met Sarah Muhammad, the head of an organization that works against honor culture here in Sweden. Glöm aldrig Pela och Fadima. We met at some public fika, very Swedish, and we got to talk, and we decided to start working together because of my background and my knowledge of the subject, because I come from a country where honor culture is very strong, even though it's not necessarily called honor culture. It's more of the natural order of things, how a man should behave and how a woman should behave, and what rights a man have and what rights a woman have. And then because I was part of that culture, and to some extent I also contributed to it by controlling my sister to some extent, or being approving of women being controlled in that way. I thought that I had to get involved in combating this structure here in Sweden as well. So, when I was here when I first came to Sweden, I was living in a tiny village called Hälleforsnäs. It's outside of a town called Flen. I don't know if you know about it. Anyways, I had a Syrian neighbor who has just come to Sweden, and they just had a baby. And then he came to me and asked me, Omar, can you please find out for me where can I get my son circumcised? I just looked at him and smiled, and I was like, God, this is Sweden, you cannot do this here. And then he looked at me, no, I can, it's allowed. I was like, no, this is not possible. And then I went on the internet, and to my shock and surprise, it is allowed here in Sweden. And this for me, I couldn't understand it, to be honest. A country like Sweden that claims to put the child's interest ahead of everything, that the child interest would come after the parents' so-called religious freedom. And to me personally, since I have undergone this operation when I was 2 months old, an operation that, of course, at this age I could not have chosen, and it has marked me with the identity that I no longer subscribe to, because I'm no longer Muslim. And it was a violation of my bodily integrity, and it's an operation that I would not have chosen to undergo today. Don't know if the mic is... Yeah.
Är den här bättre? Hallå?
Maybe that is better. Then I don't have to feel like a horse either.
Yeah.
Yeah? Better? Okay, good. So yeah, it kind of like provoked all these feelings within me, and I just couldn't accept it, so to speak. And when I looked into it, it was that it has been allowed here in Sweden since 2001 to be done for non-medical reasons, and if the child was above 2 months old, it has to be done by a doctor. And it's curious about this 2 month old thing, because like I said, I was circumcised also when I was 2 months old, and back in Egypt there is this strange belief that babies at this age cannot feel pain. So there is no anesthetics that are used or anything of the sort. And when I asked my mother, she said, yeah, because babies cannot feel pain at this age, which is quite strange. A little bit of statistics, like I know that Socialstyrelsen here in 2007 has made an investigation and found that so many operations of male genital mutilation or circumcision were being still performed at homes in unsanitary environment, and quite often with people who are not licensed to perform it. And the statistics says that it's around 40 children of Jewish parents and 3,000 children of Muslim parents, and it's only less than 1,000 that are performed within the healthcare system, even when it's legal. And I use here children of Muslim parents, for example, not Muslim children, because there is no such thing as a religious child. Children do not have a religious identity of their own, and it's not right to force that religious identity automatically on them in accordance to what their parents subscribe to. One more interesting thing is that in the English-speaking world, circumcision started to be popular around like 19th and 20th century, out of some kind of obsession with stopping masturbation, because masturbation was believed to be linked to many illnesses, including insanity or things of the sort. And they thought that this would be the cure for masturbation, to start removing the foreskin of boys. And it was Jonathan Hutchinson, for example, in the UK, in England, who started like some kind of like a campaign to popularize that. And this was also applied to women to some extent by removing the clitoris to also prevent masturbation. And then there was the anti-masturbation movement. It's quite weird for me that this John Harvey Kellogg, who was the inventor of the cereal, who was one of the leaders of this anti-masturbation movement. He had like an obsession with it. And he decided he was promoting it as some kind of rehabilitation for men who are, for boys who are masturbating, and also some kind of punishment in a way, and to do it without anesthesia. And the same thing for women, to apply acid to the clitoris to stop them from masturbating. Right now in the United States, though, it's not exactly done out of religious conviction, but out of like preconceived belief that it's just healthy and this is why it should be done. But it has been falling moderately, but it has been falling in the United States. It has fallen at a much faster rate in the rest of the Western world, but maybe they will get there. And in Africa, it's quite common, but depending also on the part. So it's about 60% of males in Africa who are circumcised for various reasons. For example, North Africa, it's for religious reasons. For Central Africa, it's like coming of age ritual. And in South Africa, or like parts of in the South, it has been promoted by WHO to prevent HIV. And it's of course very much connected to Muslims and Jews, because it's the vast majority of people who are circumcised are actually Muslim. And then there are arguments that are brought for allowing genital mutilation of boys, such as the religious freedom of the parents. But I don't think this argument holds, because the religious freedom of the parents does not supersede the right of the child to their own body. If the child grows up and wants to get circumcised, as an adult makes a conscious choice to do that, of course it's their right. But it's the body of the child is not the property of their parents to do with as they see fit. Another thing is hygiene or health benefits. When it comes to hygiene, I mean, we have soap. We don't really need circumcision to be clean down there. And if it's for prevention of STDs or HIV, again, we are talking about the circumcision of babies, of underage boys. Again, if somebody grows up, if a man decides that they want to clip their penis, then they can do that. Another argument also is that this would lead to, if it was like made illegal, it would lead to the practice going underground. But I also don't see this as a valid argument, because you can say that of anything. You can say that of female genital mutilation. If we will forbid female genital mutilation, then people would still do it in an unsanitary environment. But this is not how we should be. Still not me. So I don't see this as a valid argument either. Because what we should be doing is just to be upholding the child's right to autonomy over their own body. And one more thing is that religious freedom also includes freedom from religion. So I would argue that circumcision of boys is a violation of religious freedom, because you're again imposing an ideology or religion on a child that has not chosen that out of conscious conviction. Like I said, I am an example. This was forced on me, and I no longer subscribe to this ideology or to this religion. But I'm marked with this identity right now, and I would not have chosen it as an adult. And of course, it's a violation of the bodily integrity of the child, because you are altering permanently and irreversibly a part of the child's body, and a very intimate part, moreover. And there are possible complications. I think it was around 10 to 12% or something like that complications occur after circumcision. And there is some controversy when it comes to the impact on the sex life and the sexual sensitivity, because the foreskin also has nerve endings and it could impact sensitivity, and it has been shown that the foreskin is very sensitive to the touch as well. So that, for me also, it's very strange that this would be allowed to, despite it being possibly impacting the sexual life of the person forever. In Iceland recently, there has been an attempt to ban circumcision of boys. And it was proposed by Fremskrittspartiet in Iceland to put the bill into Parliament for voting. But this, as I understand, has not been going very well actually, and it's not clear if the bill will go to the Parliament for voting at all. But it's good at least that some country is trying to. I would argue also that this is a form of child abuse. First, it inflicts a pain on the child. This idea that the baby does not feel pain is totally ridiculous. And if the child is older, then the effect of the operation lasts for quite a bit of time, and it is painful. And using anesthetics also involves risk at this very young age. And I would say it's also a form of mutilation. Some people get a little bit upset when the word mutilation is mentioned in connection to circumcision of boys. But the definition of mutilation is to injure, disfigure, or make imperfect by removing or irreparably damaging parts. And the medical definition is removing part of the body that is without disease. And this seems to be in line with some circumcision of boys. But even if it's not, you are permanently changing the genitalia of a person forever without them consenting to this. And again, some people don't like this word because they think it trivializes female genital mutilation. But I don't think so, because while perhaps the purpose is different, because female genital mutilation is quite often done in order to control the sexuality of the woman, to reduce her sexual pleasure. And it's it's an aspect of honor culture, and that is not the same case when it comes to the circumcision of boys. That is true, and it's different in effect. That is also true, because the impact on the genitalia is not the same, and the impact on the health and sexual experience is also not the same. But I would say when it comes to being done to children, it is similar principle. You are violating the bodily integrity of the child without their choice, without their consent. And also it violates the principle of gender equality. It's strange that here in Sweden, knives and blades are not allowed to come near the genitalia of girls, and of course, and they should not be, while they are allowed to be free on the genitalia of men or boys. I generally speaking have, because of my background, I have some thoughts on freedom of religion. Sometimes I think it is quite strange that religion could have privileges that exceed freedom of thought and expression, privileges that could reach violating human rights, as is the case with genital mutilation. And again, there is no such thing as a religious child, and children should never be treated as such, and they should be allowed to be able to choose what to believe in without their parents exercising power over them and enforcing a religion or any ideology on them. And actually this is something that's very common with ex-Muslims, people who have left Islam, like myself, and there are many people around the world, and it's a growing phenomenon, one could say. And those, it's difficult to say the numbers, but it's thousands and thousands of people who are really against having undergone this operation. And it's difficult to know what to do about it anymore, because now you are marked for life, in a way, with this ideology, or this religion, or this identity. And almost all of them, or at least many of them, they would not have chosen to undergo this operation today if they were given a choice as adults. I wonder if we should take some questions, perhaps. Should I continue? Okay. When it comes to the religious indoctrination of children, again, this is something that I'm very opposed to, and I have undergone it myself. And for me, this was the way I see the world, and everything that happened, like, I attributed it to God. Everything good, everything bad, it's God. And when it comes to values, it can also make it quite complicated. For example, I believed that one of the greatest sins ever was for a man to have sex with another man. And I thought, when that happens, the throne of Allah shakes out of anger. So, believing in that, it made it very difficult for me at the time to be tolerant of gay people, for example. And one more thing, it's a bit intimate, but I mention it anyways. Like, during puberty, I was told, or I was made to believe, that if I masturbate, my hand will become pregnant. This is something that I actually believe. This is something I was taught, and that this is the way I will be resurrected on Judgment Day, and everyone would see my shame with my pregnant hand, and they would know what I was doing. And this is, growing up, this is something that gave me quite an amount of distress. And again, this burdens you with an ideology that you did not choose. I did not take this out of conviction. I grew up thinking that this is the truth. And I don't think this is something that it's fair for parents to do to their children. But of course, it's totally up to the person when they come of age to make a conscious choice to subscribe to any religion or ideology they want to. But they should be allowed to do that without coercion, without being forced in any way, or being brainwashed in any way to adopt that religion. There has been some reactions in Europe with regard to the circumcision of boys. In 2013, the Children's Ombudsman of all Nordic countries issued a statement saying that circumcision conflicts with basic principles of medical ethics, particularly because the operation is irreversible and painful and may cause serious complications. And they consider it to be in conflict with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. And the same position also was voiced by the Danish Medical Association in 2016. So it's for me really strange that this question did not garner any political attention here in Sweden. One of the groups that has been fighting to ban the practice is in fact Denmark, and they actually have received a lot of attention in Denmark, and there has been discussions in the parliament about the issue, but that also provoked fears. Dansk Folkeparti said that there could be a security risk if they ban the circumcision of boys. Basically, like she was saying that if we ban circumcision of boys, people could kill us. So they sacrifice the foreskin for security, it seems. Also, one interesting argument that I've been confronted with, actually it's not very interesting, I think it's absurd, but that there isn't enough men who have undergone circumcision as boys who are complaining about it. As long as the majority of men circumcised are not complaining about it, then it's okay. And this is reflective of a actually phenomenon that's quite common, putting so-called the rights of the group over the rights of the individual. And this is very dangerous and very harmful because there are many individuals within the group who do not want to conform with the general tradition or norms within their group. So you're oppressing these people. One should always focus on individual rights, not so-called group rights. And unfortunately, the history of our practice seems to start in my homeland. And it has been also believed to have been practiced by some of the ancient Semitic people. And it has like ritualistic and traditional roots in Africa, for example, as rites of passage to manhood, or being recognized as a warrior, and so on. In Islam, there is actually not exactly a strong consensus as one would think, because in the Quran there isn't anything that basically instructs the circumcision of boys. Even some people who are, it's a sect in Islam, Quranists, who subscribe only to the Quran, they think that practice should be forbidden because the Quran says that man was created perfect and that any altering in the physical body is forbidden or haram. But still, the majority take the view that it should be done, and it varies like when it is done. Sometimes it's on average done when at the age of 7, for example, but it could be done at the age of like just a few days old, or just at puberty, and it's often accompanied by some kind of celebration or a feast to celebrate this event. In Sunni Islam, there is 4 schools of jurisprudence. 2 of these schools, they say that it's actually not obligatory, but it's sunnah, which is something that is that has been done by the Prophet and recommended by him. And 2 other schools say that it's obligatory and all Muslims should undergo it. But it was forced on people in the countries that have been conquered by the Arabs during the Islamic conquests. And some people, like in Persia, for example, they have been punished when they have been found uncircumcised. Also in Shia Islam, most Shia traditions regard this as obligatory. In Judaism, we have already gotten some introduction to that. Yeah. So like I was saying, it's the vast majority of people who are circumcised are Muslim. It's around 70% of the men who are circumcised in the world are Muslim. And it's practiced in most parts of Africa, in Muslim majority countries, and Israel. And it has declined modestly to some extent in the US, but it has significantly declined in other English-speaking countries, like the UK, Canada, Australia, and so on, although it has been as common in the 19th and 20th century. And in Europe, it's mainly performed by Muslim immigrants and Jewish people. I thought a little bit about this. This is the European Convention on Human Rights. When it comes to the part of freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And I thought about this number 2. Freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs shall be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and necessary in democratic society in the interests of public safety, for protection of public order, health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. So I would say that this is a clear violation of this last part, the rights and freedoms of others, the rights of the child, their autonomy, their agency over their own body. And it's strange for me that this is still allowed here. Yeah, that was all.